Hi, my name is Bob McAuliffe, and this is A Child for Hire. It's been a while since my last podcast, and I feel that I have a reason that will resonate with others as to why. My first podcast dealt with the sexual abuse that I suffered from the age of 3 to 4. Now, this was the first time that I shared what happened to me in quite a public domain. And when I sat down and decided that I was going to do this series of podcasts covering the sexual abuse throughout my childhood and early teens, I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm in a good place. I'm ready to do this. And I was. And I recorded the first podcast, and I was happy and relieved to get the information out there. What I didn't expect was the emotional triggers that would be opened up from sharing. Now, I've been through counselling and I've been through therapy, etc., and I've dealt with what happened, how it happened, the effect it had on my life, what it led to within my life, etc. But what became apparent was that I hadn't more dealt with the triggers. Now, when I talk about triggers, I'm talking about the things that we didn't necessarily know are going to bring back a bad memory. For example, tasting something can bring back a strong memory of something bad. That taste could be something that you have hated for a long time and haven't associated it with what you have been through. And for me, it opened the door to quite a lot of triggers, and it made me look at my life and identify the fact that I do suffer from a lot of triggers. And there's a lot of triggers that have happened over the years that I've only just identified what they're connected to. And as we don't talk enough about triggers and things that others will say set you off, I thought that I would do a special podcast just on triggers. And I would share some of the triggers that I have and that I experience, what caused them, and the reaction that it can bring. Now, you'll see me looking up here and here and here and here on my screen. It's because it's surrounded by notes that I wanted to make sure that I covered certain things because they're the things that I think people will identify with and the things that may help others. I'm not saying that everything that I've been through or experienced is the same as anybody else that has suffered sexual, emotional, or physical abuse. But what I am saying is these are mine and they may help open the door for others to realize that while they have mentally dealt with some of the scars left, that there may be other things that have never been addressed. So, I am nervous doing this, and you'll see that by the fact that I say M quite a lot. I changed my glasses several times. It's a shield. The biggest trigger that I have is a very strange one, and has made me re-record this podcast several times. And that's my name. I was born Robert McAuliffe. And I decided when I moved to London and escaped most of the bad in my life that I wanted to be called Bob. New city, new name, new identity, new chances. And so when I have to deal with the name Robert, it triggers a lot of memories for me. And nearly all of them are bad. I don't like the name. I hate that I have to use the name on my passport and when I do CVs or I go for job interviews, etc. And I make light of it and I make a joke and I go, only my mother calls me Robert and it's only when I've done something bad. Partly the truth, mostly not the truth. It is just connected with all of the abuse that I suffered throughout the years, and I just cannot bear calling myself by that name. I hate when people send me letters and documents using that name, but there's a lot of time that you just can't escape it. But it triggers a lot of emotions for me. I find myself dwelling on the past. So, for example, I went for a job interview, and the interviewer, she refused to call me Rob, and she kept calling me Robert. And I could feel my heart beating harder and harder and harder. And so, obviously, I tried harder and harder and harder to please her. But when I left that interview, I threw up. And that may seem weak willed or um, overreaction to the situation, but for me, it was like somebody abusing me again and again and again and again. And if you can imagine that me as a child, in many cases, was being sexually abused with somebody constantly speaking to me and saying, oh, Robert, you're so good, or, Robert, you're so bad. And over and over and over again, that you tend to then associate with that. So I'm Bob, and my first trigger is my name. And I think quite a few people will have that trigger. For me, it manifests itself in quite a physical way. Usually leads to me tucking up, gives me really sore heads, um, and causes me to have quite vivid and terrifying dreams. So that is just a extreme example of a trigger. But what about the everyday? So if we talk about taste as being the first trigger, and I'm not meaning taste as in the way that you dress or the way that you look. I'm talking about taste as in things that you put in your mouth. So one of mine is orange juice, and it's connected to my Uncle Mike, who I talked about in my last podcast, who used to give me an orange drink either as a reward post being sexually abused or a more sour orange drink, which I've now identified with being laced with something before being sexually abused by my Uncle Mike and his friends. And I have quite a violent reaction to orange juice. I don't like the smell. I don't like oranges. I struggle with the taste. I will be honest and say if I make a very alcoholic drink and put orange in it, not a problem. The alcohol covers the taste and the emotions. But seeing a glass of orange juice physically makes me want to be sick and physically makes me look for the exits. So when I have been in a situation where I've been at a meeting with a group of people and somebody's asked for an orange juice, I immediately start feeling hot, sweaty. I'm looking at where the exits are. There's usually only one, which is the door or the windows. And I physically can't sit next to that person while we drink it. My other half, when we go on holidays, will have an orange juice. And I suppose my other half makes me feel safe, and that counteracts some of the emotions. But my reaction to that is that I eat more. And I find that I comfort eat to suppress the memories, and I comfort eat to make that child less appealing to those people. And I know that's really crazy because, I'm a 50-year-old man and, I'm putting on the weight as a 50-year-old man, but emotionally, I still feel everything that I went through when I was 3 and 4, and so I do switch on to protection mode, to protecting that child. And it's starting to work the more that I've recognized that emotion and that link and that trigger. And there's a lot of things that I can do to avoid it. I've tried a lot of the things suggested to make it a part of my life, but life is too short, and why should I? I don't like it. I don't want to like it. I don't want somebody to basically, work with me for several months dealing with that one thing that really is insignificant to whether or not I have a happy life going forward. So while it may be wrong to park it, I park it because I understand it. The other taste that I have quite a violent reaction to is fish. And the fish that brought this on was in what was quite popular at the time, was the dish kedgeree, which is fish and rice basically. And I was 12, going on 13, and I was sleeping with a husband and wife, Carol and David. Carol first, eventually David. We knew about each other. Both seduced me in the same way, and seduced us at a really wrong time for somebody that has been abused by two adults. At the time, it felt like a seduction. It made me feel special, and it felt right. However, looking back on it and thinking about how it ended and how I got away from the situation, and the emotional abuse that was put on to me by David, and this man is hard to describe simply for the fact that I kind of wiped a lot of the memory of him and her out of my mind because it was the first time that the abuse that I suffered was sexual and emotional, and in a way, an emotional way that made me feel bad about myself. And so, while this couple were friends with my parents, and she just wanted sexual gratification, he wanted a lot more. And he was the first person that used and abused me and over the top rewarded me. So, as an example, he would bring me records and I'd have to listen to them with him. I'd have to tell him why I liked that particular artist. And I think Suzy Quattro was the artist of choice for me. And um, I like the fact that she was a bit of a rebel, and it's what I wanted to be. They would go and say things like, um, it makes me feel like I'm with a woman and I'm horny. Dance with me. Now, Suzy Quattro, if you know her music's a bit um, kind of dance a bit crazy. He wanted to slow dance. And he'd slow dance and he'd grope me. And that groping eventually led to the dropping of trousers, making me touch him, making me do things to him with my mouth. Um, by the end, he was physically abusing me anally. After the abuse, he would make me get dressed, and then he'd make me pray while he read the Bible to me. And it was a strange, confusing experience and a hard one to get out of because whenever I tried to avoid seeing them, there would be a reason for them, one of them, or both of them, to ask my parents for something, a toolbox, Tupperware, etc., for me to have to go round and deal with whichever adult was there. And even though having sexual relations with Carol was just straightforward sex, at the time I didn't know it was abuse. I do that now. I was a child. She was an adult. She took advantage. It was wrong. Um, but David's was worse because the punishment was the praying, the kneeling, the reading the Bible, having to memorize chapters for the next time that I saw him, etc. And so the fish comes into the fact that I was invited round by both of them for a meal because my father decided that I was being a problem child and that they could help. I was being a problem child partly because of them and others. And so my worst fear was being alone with both of them, not knowing what could happen. Turned out that we had this meal and Carol went out and I was left with David. And it was the first time that I was abused after being abused. So I was anally assaulted. I was made to read Bible passages while being flogged. And since that moment, the smell, the thought, the look of fish just fills me with dread. And I've tried to make myself eat fish of different sorts. So people keep saying to me, well, this is a mild fish. And I'm like, yeah, and it comes with a flogging on the side. I haven't said it out loud, but I've said it internally. And I think that is something that has affected me when we've travelled, when I've stayed with family abroad. I remember being 16 and refusing to eat what was put in front of me. My relatives were living in a fishing port, so everything was fish. And I was sent to my bed. My cousin brought me chips, and that's what I survived on. And so the smell of fish, I'm fine with raw fish, but the smell of cooked fish just brings back the memory of not only bleeding from being physically abused, sexually abused, but also the pain from being physically abused because I wasn't good enough at what I was meant to do. Now, at the age of 12, 13, who is an expert on what needs to be done? Yes, I was a bit more experienced than others because the stuff that had happened to me up until that point, but I was being punished for something that I had no control over. So, taste is one of the things that is um, a huge manifestation that just happens day in, day out. You can't avoid these things. They're everywhere. I mean, you go to the supermarket, you go to a restaurant, you go to a bar, etc. These things are there and they set off certain emotions. Some of them are more apparent than others, and some of them are internal. So, other than taste, smell is another factor. And I think that everybody has reactions to smells differently. My examples are quite common. I think they're quite common. Sweat, body odor is a huge one for me. Whether it's somebody that's been to a gym, or if I'm in a shop, or standing in a queue, or I'm in a group of people and I smell body odor, I can't be there. I have to leave. I have to get out. And it stems from so many people that have abused me throughout my childhood and my life. My uncle, Willie, when he used to have sex with me as a 4-year-old, it was a musty, sweaty, straight after work smell. And others from gym sessions or working in removals or doing street work or just not having washed for several days, the smell of the body odor just triggers the strong emotion that I have to get away. And I may be number 2 in the queue. I'll leave. I'll go back into the store, get something else, and re-queue, whether I've queued for an hour or whether I've queued for 10 minutes. If I'm in a store and there's several people that have really bad body odor, I will leave that store. If I'm on a bus, I will get off the bus and wait for the next bus. The same with a train. If it's a work situation, I'll fake a work call. I'll have to excuse myself to go to the bathroom, etc., and then make an excuse for why I didn't come back. But it is an ingrained part of the abuse that I've suffered. The constant smell of somebody's body odor, either as they're putting their bicep over your mouth so you can't scream, or round your neck so that you can't breathe and you just smell the armpit sweat, or whether that you're being forced to go down on them and they haven't washed. Um, there's just too many examples to say, and it's a really bad one. And I think most people that have been abused by someone in close quarters will be able to list off exactly how somebody has smelt around them, which leads me on to aftershave. So I have a strong reaction to dupe. And when I was 18, 19, I was gang raped. I had moved to Edinburgh and I was working in the bar. And the bar was quite well notorious for, drunken groups, etc. The clean up at night led to having to go out the back doors, take everything down to the bottle shed, sort into crates, into bins, etc. Quite dark, and the first thing that made me realise that somebody was there was this overwhelming smell of dupe. And the reason that I knew dupe was it was the fragrance at the time. I had a friend who worked on the fragrance counter, and it was just something that people came in and asked for on a regular basis. And every time I went to see her at work, I smelt it. And when I was working in the bar, you could just smell people wearing it. And it was the first smell that I smelt knowing that there was somebody there. Turning around to expect to see one person and seeing a group of people and having a bottle smashed over my head, my clothes cut off with broken glass, and being sexually assaulted by each individual, one after the other, while stinking of alcohol, but having this real pungent smell of dupe aftershave, just is something to this day that I cannot cope with that smell. Gang rape is a whole different scenario. It's uncontrolled. There's no way to control it. I gave in. I was criticised for giving in. And I'll talk about that in a later podcast. But it's the biggest trauma in my life that's led to issues that I have to this day. I don't trust groups of lads, as expected. But for the reason that the group of guys who raped me, gang raped me, were straight. And I know that's something difficult for people to comprehend. Why would straight guys want to, rape and have sex with another guy? Alcohol does lots of things to people. It was something that I never expected. I was found by a member of the bar staff. I was treated by an entertainer who was working in the bar that night. The owner and bar manager refused to acknowledge what happened to me, and don't get me started on the police. So all of that trauma together has given me this huge issue with this fragrance and fragrances that smell like it. And because fragrances have three layers, top, middle, and bottom notes, it could be one note from a fragrance that triggers me off. And I'm immediately looking around and going, who is it? Where is it? What's it about? am I in danger? The criminal thing that I had to deal with was that my other half's best friend was a South African guy who, in reality, was such a lovely guy. He wore his fragrance. I hated his guts. We went to Australia where he had moved to. I wouldn't go and visit him. I went and did my own thing. And it's nothing that he's done, but it's just connected to the fragrance. Um, Touch is another thing, and it's not the physical touch of another person, although that can be triggering and can be something that is really upsetting. Um, for me, it's a touch sensation that triggers a memory. So, for example, um, touching something that is 100% nylon reminds me of being bent over a settee with nylon settee covers while being anally abused by a relative. Um, Faux leather is another one. And I'm not talking about the faux leather that is very similar to real leather. I'm talking about the faux leather that is the cheapest, nastiest of the end. In my case, cheap faux leather belts were used to tie me down to allow me to be abused, and it, these belts were also used to abuse me also. And at the time that this was happening, it was kind of the cheap and cheerful market stall go-to that everybody had. And so there's not one individual that I'll literally go, that individual is the person that created the trigger, because I'm talking about my gym teacher, my religious education teacher, my headmaster, a neighbour, a driver of a truck that drove for my mum and dad. Um, there's just multiples of people that had these belts, and they were used on me in so many different ways. My parents used them to belt me, and when my parents belted me, it wasn't a just a bend over and a smack here and there. I was belted across the back, the face, the head, my chest, my lower abdomen, my buttocks, my legs, everywhere. And if my mum lost her temper, I could probably spend 5 to 10 minutes being belted. My dad liked to buckle, and he just took his aggression out on me. And so there's not one person that kind of I can go, that touch by that person was worse than the next person or the person after that or the person after that. And massage, simple one. I think most people that have been sexually abused or physically or emotionally abused will say the same thing. Having someone you don't know touch you in an intimate way is just repulsive. And it's the only way I can describe it. It just repulses me and it scares me and it makes me feel bad. And I can't describe it in any other way. We've had situations whereby they've brought somebody into the office to do office massages, and I've said no, and they've just come, they've put their hands on my shoulders. I tense up. and I cannot move, and the fear of God in me is just overwhelming. I've been in situations where people have literally, oh, like, just give you a hand massage. And again, I'm standing in the store, somebody demonstrating a moisturizer, and like, I'll just give you a hand massage with this moisturizer. And I have just frozen. It's a horrible feeling, and there's nothing that makes you get past it. But I dated somebody, we're working, doing freelance journalism, technically, in Scotland, and he always started off with, yo, you're looking really tense, let me do your shoulders. And he'd go, oh no, I can't reach, you need to take your shirt off. And I wouldn't. And they would just basically either rip my shirt open or undo the buttons. Undoing the buttons, I'd fight back. And then they just learned that it was easier to rip the shirt open. And then I was like, well, I can't afford to lose the shirt, so fine, open the shirt. But it always went further, and, I could feel an erection in my back. And this is somebody who's 16, 17, doing intern type work and going, I need this for a career, and this person is going to sexually assault me. And so you try to do the easy things, the reach around, and just do a quick hand job. And, go, okay, fine, I'll do a blue job. But the longer they're, the easier they find it, and the more they find ways to get what they want. And so again, I was raped. And not just on one occasion. The thing that made it worse was that photographs were taken, film was taken, that's still in circulation somewhere. But the worst thing was it triggered me back to the 3-4-year-old who was having photos taken, and photos that were shared and photos that I've seen, and are just appalling to think about. So I don't want to go on for a long period of time, and I can feel myself getting really sweaty, etc. So I think I'm going to cut to people. And that may be a strange one, but people can have a huge effect on triggering an emotion or a feeling or a memory. And for me, I've been in the situation where I've had bosses who have triggered for me some of the worst feelings that I've ever felt. So, as an example, I worked for a TV shopping company, and we were doing a partnership with a TV channel, and we were taken to Las Vegas to a massive trade show, and we're having drinks afterwards. At this stage, I had been married for almost 20 years. It was known. One of the TV executives, very drunk, said, I'm really horny, I need a blowjob. And my CEO turned round and looked at me and went, well, we've got an expert here, so Bob sort him out. And I didn't know how to react because I was in a wet situation. My tickets were held by the company, and I couldn't get away from the situation because I was in a foreign country. And I kind of shrugged it off, and this executive went and staggered to the toilet, and my CEO leaned over and went, we are going to make sure that this deal goes swimmingly, and he will do whatever it takes to make sure that he is satisfied by the end of the night. And I was mortified because I thought that I was good at my job. I was senior management. I managed one of the biggest teams within the firm. And here I was out being asked to do prostitution on behalf of the company. And somebody else that was there, who I thought was an ally and a colleague, said, "We've all been in the position, so, just get on with it. Shut your eyes and think of the dollars." And they weren't married, they weren't with anyone. I'm married, I'm faithful to my partner, and I am not paid enough money to prostitute myself. And I understand that people do have to trade sex for money, and I don't have an issue with people doing that. But for me, having been through what I'd been through in my life, and fighting and working as hard as I could, and that job I was working, I was in the office at 7 in the morning. I left about 10 at night. My travelling time was 2.5 hours each way. I was working on empty. I was doing everything I could to show how great I could do the job. And this is what was seen as being the pinnacle of doing a good job. And I had been left alone with this person. He said, "I've been told that you're going to satisfy me." And I was like, "Look, you've got the wrong end of the stick. I'll lose my job if I don't do something, but I just can't do it." And he was like, "Are you saying you won't do it? You know what this can do for you do?" And I was like, "No, I will not do it. I can't do it. And if it means that I lose my job, and it means that, you will go and grass me up, then obviously that's what you'll need to do. But I just can't, and I just won't." So I spent the rest of the trip in fear. I avoided the going out in the evening. I came back to the UK. I started having panic attacks. I had a massive panic attack in my office, which my CEO gave me a written warning for, and eventually led to me agreeing an exit with the company, and a payoff notice period and an NDA. Um, but those panic attacks started because I was continually terrified every time an external party was brought in for a meeting and I was asked to come and join, because I didn't know what I was joining to do, whether I was joining that meeting as a director or whether I was joining that meeting as a prostitute. And it was just a horrible, tense situation. And I had a massive panic attack, passed out in my office. A paramedic came, said his oxygen supply is normal. Obviously, he's had some sort of event, etc. He needs to go home for the day. And within 48 hours, I had a letter from my CEO saying that I had faked a medical issue, and as the paramedic had said that my oxygen levels were normal, etc., 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 this was an issue. And a panic attack, if you have it, can be like having a heart attack. your chest tightens, you cannot breathe, everything starts spinning and blurring and going together, your heart is beating 10 to the dozen, and you either get through it, you pass out, or you have some other reaction. And my reaction was to pass out. When you pass out, your body automatically restores everything. And so, yes, by the time somebody arrives, it looks like nothing has happened. But obviously, it's a real thing. And that situation hurt because I was promoted 3 times to become director in a short period of time, and to effectively be forced out because of something that my CEO did, and the situation that he created just was unacceptable. But then people use power in different ways. So when I was 14 in Scotland, I met he was a Scottish TV star at the time. Um, he used to do appearances in youth clubs up and down the country. And Phil Mackay, who was the so-called celebrity, did an event in Dundee, which I went to because it was close to where I lived. He was the big celebrity at the time, and he would have been the biggest name that I had in my autograph book at the time. Um, so picked me out of a group of kids and said, I've got some merchandise back in my hotel room. Do you want to come back with me and I'll give you some goodies? And it didn't figure, even through everything that I'd been through in my life to that point, that this person was going to take advantage of me. And I went back to his hotel room, really excited, looking forward to telling my brothers and sisters, looking forward to giving them goodies from something that I'd been to that was really, really special. I got back, and Phil Mackay said, I need to basically give you a t-shirt, but I won't know what the right size is until we put it on you. So can you go in the bathroom and take off your top and your trousers, and let's try it on. And there was a kind of a funny look on his face, and I felt a little bit uncomfortable, but I was like, yeah, I'm getting a free t-shirt, I'm getting some other stuff, this is really cool. And he promised me on the way there that he had the top 10 singles, and I'd get the top 10 singles. So I went in, changed, came out, he said, come sit next to me, we'll try the t-shirts on. And he said to me, how would you like to be one of my special boys? I was like, okay, what does that entail? Well, I have a house in Wales, and I bring my special boys for holidays. Would you like to be one of my special boys that comes on holiday to Wales? And I was kind of like, well, for a holiday, of course, it sounds really great. And if there's going to be loads of other kids my age, then obviously it's really safe. Now, I can't remember in detail whether he said that he lived with his mother or his mother lived with him or something, which was why he had this place in Wales as his place. And he was like, so this is my book. You need to find the page and put your name and telephone number in so that I can phone you. And you want to remember at this time, everybody had landlines. And he went, if I phone you, I'll basically say that it's your friend from Dundee, but I won't say my name because I don't want people to know that I'm having these parties. Now, parties then was the red flag for me. wasn't already with other boys. This was something that was going to involve sex. And so I was like, oh, right, okay, yeah, I'll put my number in. And so I found the relevant page, I put my real name in, and I put a fake number. Uh, at that time, we only had a dial code and 5 digits, and I just changed one of the digits. I made sure that I got as many goodies as possible. I waited. I waited for him to use the bathroom, and I made some sort of excuse for him to use the bathroom. I think I spilt something on him or something, and he had to use the bathroom. And I grabbed the bag of goodies and my clothes. I was in my underpants, and I fled. And I remember running down the stairs in the hotel, running out the door, running down the street, and I ran all the way through the high street, just in my underwear, to the bus station to wait on my bus. And I literally went into the toilets, put my clothes on, I hid in the ticket office until I could see my bus. And I waited to the very last second that the bus before the bus was to leave, and I ran out and jumped on the bus, gave my ticket, and the bus driver said, "Just made the bus," and I was like, "Yeah, I know, I'm really sorry," and I did that so that I could not be found and be caught. It was one of the most terrifying things that I think that I'd been through with somebody that was meant to be a safe celebrity, and it's happened a couple of times in my life whereby I've met somebody of note who's wanted more than they should, or they've done stuff, and I will talk about them in depth as we go through the podcast covering different periods of my life. But that was just one that was an example of a situation that a child could be put in that couldn't tell the difference between a holiday and effectively being abused by multiple people in a remote cottage where there was nowhere that you could escape. And I dread to think that what would have happened to me if I'd actually been in that situation. And then this one is aggression. Aggression is the biggest fear of anyone that's been abused, because when somebody is aggressive towards you, you immediately feel the fear of what comes next. And it doesn't matter if it's a friend who's fallen out with you, or if it's your boss, or if it's somebody in the street who's just mouthing off, or somebody that you see in, day out. That aggression penetrates your inner soul that makes you just literally go, how do I escape? And I had a teacher, religious education teacher, who was so aggressive, he used to throw tables and chairs at pupils. He used to lock pupils in a store cupboard in his classroom and keep you there until the end of the day, and he would find ways to abuse you in that cupboard. And I was constantly late for his class because I came from senior choir, which was in a different building in a different part of the town. I had a chair thrown at me. I had dusters thrown at me, the kind that used to clean blackboards, and a lot of younger people won't know what those are, but they are made of wood, they are heavy, and they are painful if they hit you in the head. I still have a mark on my head where I was hit by one of those. I had a desk thrown at me, and my biggest fear was locked in the dark cupboard. and he would come into the cupboard in the dark, and he wore one of those big university-style cloaks, and it encapsulated you. And so when he was abusing you, whether it was making you give him oral, or him attempting to give you oral, or performing anal sex on you, he would wrap this massive cloak round, and it was almost like you were in this dark hole with no way to escape, with this person doing whatever they wanted. And I dreaded going to his class. I dreaded going to his education. I got an A, and I didn't even do the exam. And I think that just gives you a level of understanding how often, how regular, and how bad the abuse was. He was somebody else that used corporal punishment, um, and had a bamboo stick that was used to hit you, a ruler, um, a broken leg of a table in one instance, and I would go home and I would show these things to my mother, and she would go, "School is about growing up, roughhousing happens, just get on with it." And it was just dismissive. And through my podcast, you'll understand about my parents and what my parents got out of everything that happened to me. But the level of aggression that was shown to me by this teacher, who, if I didn't do the right thing in the right way and make sure that they ended up allowing me to leave because they were happy, I would get one of the worst beatings that I probably have had in my life. And being gang raped is a different kind of pain. Having somebody hitting you with a table leg, inserting a table leg into you, and leaving you bleeding and in pain and sending you home is a different type of level of aggression and abuse. And the aggression just stemmed across multiple teachers and headmasters within my experience. And I'm not saying that, they weren't good teachers in terms of teaching what they taught. I wasn't particularly a difficult student. I was nervous, I was shy, I was introvert, but I was put through some of the worst levels of abuse that I had in school. And to date, it still triggers me meeting an aggressive person or hearing about somebody's level of aggression that just basically makes me compare to this teacher. And I'll talk about school life in a separate podcast. But it kind of gives you an idea of how aggression can be one of those things that when it triggers you, you become that introverted, quiet, shy, nervous, not raising your head above the parapet type person. And it's not who I am in everyday life. For some reason, I have a sunny, lucky personality most of the times. I'm quite contented with my life and my partner and our puppy. But there is times where I'm just not me, and I can revert into the scared, nervous, not wanting to be here type person. And when it happens, and it happens without warning, it's so dramatic and so bad that my friends just panic. My other half kind of knows what to do to make me feel comfortable, not better, comfortable. I'm comfortable enough to basically breathe and take in some air, maybe smoke, maybe have a glass of whiskey, and go and sleep on it. And waking up the next day with a fresh perspective and basically going, it's a new day. And today I'm going to be, and getting through it step by step is really important. And I'm not an expert on how to deal with your triggers. All I can say is that when I'm triggered and I realize that I'm triggered, I either walk away to give myself time to breathe, to talk to myself about where I am, what my life is, how no one can take me back to what I was and what I went through, and to give myself time to clear my head. And that is my biggest thing, is the power to walk away from living my life till my early teens, not being able to walk away and get away from the situation, which is why the situation that happened with the TV shopping channel was so dramatic for me, because it threw me back into that loop of, you can't get away. There's nothing you can do about it. You have to accept it, because otherwise, how are you going to live, work, earn money, keep a job? So, for me, and my advice is walk away. It makes you all powerful. It makes you realize that you have the freedom to choose. Sit somewhere where you're not going to be annoyed, a park, the beach, somewhere where you can just basically breathe, take in the air, take in the sounds, and clear your mind, and effectively telling yourself no one is going to be able to do what they did to me before. I am safe, I'm in charge, nobody can touch me. And for me, that's the thing that's worked the most. And that's where I'm going to wrap up my podcast. I realise that this is a long one, but I feel that it needed to be. I'm sorry for some of the lighting issues, but I hope you bear with it. I hope you find this useful in some way, and I hope that none of the things that I've brought up have triggered you. And if you want to drop me a note, please do. I'm always happy to have a conversation or respond to questions, etc. So I'm Bob McAuliffe. I was a child for hire, and I'm going to leave you till my next podcast. Thanks very much for watching, and I hopefully get to talk to you again soon. Bye.